the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
This is Tiffany U, and this is Business Story of the Week.
Fantastic. And that is a lovely Tiffany U. And I'm Joshua, your host for today. Every week, every episode, we bring you topics and inspiration. And my goodness, today, Tiffany is quite the inspiration herself. She's got a story to tell us today. And of course, Tiffany is the CEO and founder of DiverseAbility, a 3-time TEDx speaker, and the author of Anti-Ableist Manifesto. She is a former Gold Sachs banker turned disability advocate, where she's on a mission today to elevate disability pride, build inclusive communities, and smash stereotypes. Her TEDx talks, How to Help Employees with Disabilities Thrive, has over 1 million views. She serves on the LA 28 Olympic Paralympic Games, by the way, working group, and was a co-chair of the World Economic Sustainable Development Impact Summit. And today, Tiffany is going to share her story and her insights with us. Tiffany, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you doing?
Great, how are you?
I'm doing great. I mean, we had a little talk. I'm quite excited about this episode, and I've only ever had 2 guests. It would be my second guest, where we can talk a little bit about ableism, but more than that, just like thriving past that, right? But before we get into it, Tiff, is it okay if I call you Tiff? I didn't ask you that.
Tiff is fine.
Tiffany, what was a young Tiff like? What was a young Tiffany like? That's why I always ask this because I want to go back to the past. We want to lay down the foundation on this one, right? Did the young Tiffany did she always feel like she was included? What did you think about inclusion growing up, and what was your story surrounding that inclusion?
Such a good question. So little Tiffany was the youngest of 4, the daughter of a Taiwanese immigrant and a refugee from the Vietnam War. And I think as the youngest of 4, growing up, I didn't really feel like I had much presence. And I didn't really feel like anyone was paying attention to me.
Interesting.
And
That's
yeah, go ahead.
usually that's a that comes with the middle children, the middle child. Like they feel like the youngest gets the most attention, the oldest gets the most responsibility. I, as a middle child, attest to that. Like I had never felt like I got the attention, but youngest of 4 felt like never was quite felt like you always had to prove yourself, so to speak. Tiffany, now of course today you don't have to do much proving of yourself. You quite been leaving quite the advocacy and the mission yourself, and you've led yourself down to this path of advocating for ableism. But again, we need to set the groundwork on here. We need to talk to people and talk about your story. What led you to this advocacy, first of all, and what was it that you needed to overcome in order to thrive, and the same thing that you teach today and help others thrive with as well?
Yeah, so many good questions in there. So it's difficult to think about little Tiffany because I think about little Tiffany pre-disability, and then I think about little Tiffany post-disability.
Yes.
So at the age of 9, I was involved in a car accident. My dad was driving. He unfortunately passed away. I acquired a handful of injuries, including permanently paralyzing one of my arms, breaking a couple bones in one of my legs that would leave me as a temporary wheelchair user for about 4 months, and much later being diagnosed with a mental illness, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I kind of wanted to share that background story because I think what I needed to overcome was shame that I felt about myself, my body, all the events surrounding the car accident. And I do want to clarify that my advocacy is against ableism, which is this
Right.
system of oppression. No, but it's interesting because ableism is actually this newer term. The first time it was ever used was 1981, right? So I think
Oh, wow.
we're still trying to. It's new. It's newish. Like I was born in the 80s. You know, it's a little bit older than I am. But ableism as a term, while new, the discrimination and bias that
Yes.
disabled people face on a daily basis have been around even before we had language
Yes,
for it.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so yeah, I think the overcoming part was overcoming a very loud inner critic that said that my voice didn't matter, and
Mhm,
then overcoming shame that I felt like having a disability was a shameful experience. But
mhm.
if you look at the stats, there are over 1 billion people globally who live with a disability.
Wow.
If we
Wow.
think that disability and shame go together, that's over 1 billion people who are internalizing a lot of shame. And I
Absolutely.
became really curious. The same way both you and I are Asian,
Mhm.
is I can't leave my race or my
Of course.
nationality or my ethnicity behind when I walk into a space. The same way where, as much as I would like sometimes, I can't leave behind the fact that I have a disability, the fact that I have to think about a different level of access than other people
Mhm,
do. And
mhm.
one quick example I'll share is a bunch of my friends were organizing an event to go to a pottery class.
Okay.
And
All
have you
right.
ever been to a pottery class before?
I have been to a pottery
Oh,
class
okay.
before, and yes,
Uh,
it's quite interesting. Of course, it's quite fun, but how did you manage that?
So that's a good question, right? How did I
Mhm.
manage that? So I asked my friend, I said, hey, my arm's paralyzed. Do you think that they would be able to accommodate me? And my friend said, I don't know. Understandably so. Privilege makes it so that you don't have to think about those things. So I reached out to the pottery studio and I didn't hear back from them. And as a result, I made the decision to not attend. So in addition to not attending because I wasn't sure if I could participate in the pottery class, I also missed out on hanging out with my friends and creating a deeper relationship. And so I just wanted to highlight that as like an everyday example where we kind of have to think about all the things we have to miss out on.
Yes.
And it's not just participating in the pottery class, it's the building of the social
Everything.
relationship, everything.
Mhm, mhm.
There are other things.
But
But
and the,
that's just a small example of some of the things that I've had to think about.
absolutely, I was going to say precisely that. The small things, the little things that we take for granted. People who are able, basically, who just like probably your friend, like never have to think about it ever. Like, hey, like I have no idea. I have two working arms. I've never had to think about that, right? But now it's like we're here and we're trying, like you said, the vocabulary is new, the communication surrounding it is pretty new, the awareness also pretty new, and on top of that, the disability community have had to not only deal with shame, you know, internally, externally as well. And you're talking about, like in your case, you've had to deal with your grief, you've had to overcome so much to get to where you are today, and to get that courage to talk about your story is very, very important because now people feel like they have a voice. Because if you get to tell your story, then they feel like, wow, now I can get to tell my story. And 1 billion in the disability community, there is a lot of voices out there that needs to be heard. But Tiffany, why do you feel like you said, well, we talked about this, like the ableism is quite new. In fact, I'll be honest, when the first time I found out about you years ago was the first time I encountered the word ableism, and I felt like, wow, that's very cool what she talks about. And today, do you feel like years ago when you started this advocacy when it comes to against ableism, against the discrimination of disability community, how do you feel like it has progressed, and why do you feel like? Here's the thing: it's a better question. Let's frame it this way: if disability advocacy was a marathon, what mile do you think we're at? And what does the finish line look like to you?
Ooh, so I have two answers to this because I know your first question was around what progress have we made. So
Hmm. Please.
DiverseAbility is the disability community that I started, and we're actually turning 15 this year. And
Wow.
one thing I love, so I've been disabled for 27 years, and I share that because I spent the first half of that time kind of sitting in my grief, sitting in my shame. And I spent the second half, these last 15 years, finding my voice, finding my community, learning more about disability culture and history, ultimately leading to writing this book. 15 years ago, when I would tell people that I was on this journey to explore what being disabled and proud meant to me, they would give me strange looks because they couldn't understand how a disabled person could be proud. And, the definition that I use of disability pride is when a disabled person asserts their value and worth in a society that reminds them that they should feel shame about who they are, right? So in some ways, disability pride is like this middle finger to society saying, hey, I'm
Hmm.
here and I'm so proud. And so I have seen change. I'm glad that I have been active in this space for 15 years where I mention the phrase disability pride now. And even if it's mostly popularized within the disability community, if I say it to people who are not in our community, they can probably name a couple more disabled people, either that they've seen through the media or
Wow.
even you and I getting introduced a couple of years ago, right? And then to your second question around where are we in the marathon, there's a quote that I really like from someone named Dr. Robert Bullard. And he says, the fight for justice is a marathon relay. The fight for
Wow.
justice is a marathon
Wow.
relay. And what I like about that quote, or at least what it means to me, is that we will never stop fighting for disability justice. It just may change from generation to generation. So one thing that has been interesting in my turn of the marathon, I feel like I currently have the baton, but then when I hand it off, it's another marathon. So I can't tell you what mile we're at because we're just continuing to run marathons our
Hmm.
entire, our entire, but what's changed from, I think, the last generation to my generation is the emergence of social media as a way for
Mm.
the disability community to not only build power, build
Right.
coalition. There have been instances where a public rally of the disability community coming together has put pressure on a brand or an elected official
Right.
to make some change, or a video going viral. Like that wasn't
Right.
something that was happening 15 years ago. But it's also enabling us to find each other and build community much quicker, which is
There you go.
actually
There you
supporting the
go.
next generation of disability advocates to find their voice quicker. Because if I could do it
Wow.
all over again, I wish that 9-year-old Tiffany didn't have to wait until she was 21 to find her first disability community. I bet it was out there somewhere, but
Yep.
for me as the daughter of immigrants, it was disability was just viewed as such a shameful identity or
Yes.
part of our story that finding community wasn't even something we thought about. And when you don't have community, you become even more isolated and disempowered in your experience. And that's where the shame then becomes even bigger, right?
Exactly. It gets bigger. It's a vicious cycle, basically. Like you don't have anyone to talk to, you don't have anyone to understand, and you just keep, you just feel like the society has no need for me anymore. They constantly make me feel like I have to feel shame. My question in there was like, how did it just came to mind, and as we start kind of like analyzing the situation or analyzing ableism in general when it comes to society at large, for one part, you know it's still definitely deliberate. Like we feel like there's no more value for there's no reason for us to support the disabled community. But on one part, I feel like the shame is feel like it's a stereotype in that it's not deliberate, in that like like, but I'm so sorry, like just like there's pity in there. And again, there's so
Mm.
many layers that the disability community has had to deal with. And you talk about this in your manifesto, the anti-ableist manifesto. You talk about smashing these stereotypes. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. To our audience and listeners, make sure we're going to plug that in there on our description below. Make sure to grab yourselves a copy. What was the inspiration behind the title? Of course, it's quite clear, but what was the inspiration behind writing the book, and how has it shaped your advocacy, and how has it shaped again, the communication surrounding ableism up to today. Talk to us about that journey.
Yeah, so I want to amplify something you said, which is we as the disability community, we don't want your pity, we want your respect. The way that kind of discrimination and ableism shows up uniquely within the disability community compared to other systems of oppression is through the idea of I'll help you as a disabled person, but I won't hire you. So effectively what that means is and it feels kind of similar, but when you help someone, there's a power hierarchy. When you hire someone, there may be some power there too, but you see someone as a peer, you see someone as valuable
Yes,
enough to welcome
and
into
an
your
equal.
workspace to work toward a shared goal, right? So the idea behind this book was, at least here in the US, our unemployment numbers are still twice that of our non-disabled peers. I think if we look at global numbers, the unemployment rate for disabled people is still around 70 to 80%. In the US, we have had a law in place called the Americans with Disabilities Act since 1990. So for over 30 years, we've had a law in place that says, hey, you can't discriminate on the basis of disability in employment in public spaces, but you're still seeing it. And so I wanted to write this anti-ableist manifesto to say, no matter where you are on your journey, I hope you can pick up this book, flip to wherever. So the book is structured in terms of a framework called Me, We, Us. And Me, We, Us is a social impact framework of how we can create transformative change. It says, here's what I need to know about ableism. Here's what we need to know in our interpersonal relationships around interrupting microaggressions. And then here's what the world as a society can do to create systemic and lasting change. But what really needs to happen is we can have all the policies in place that we would like. But if you still do not fundamentally believe that disabled people are your peers and that we are valuable and worthy simply for existing, then those policies will fall flat. You'll implement them when there's momentum, and then you'll forget about it because you didn't actually believe it, right? So my hope is that the book takes you on this journey so that by the end you can feel energized and hopeful that dismantling ableism, joining me in my fight against ableism, is something that
Yes,
is possible for all of us.
definitely possible. And again, like the talk, the awareness behind it is growing. And of course, you are one of the leading voices in that communication as well. And we have had made a lot of progress, but there's a long way to go. There's definitely a long way to go. But like you said, we're able to connect to each other a lot more now. We're able to spread the awareness. We're able to spread the word a lot more now, a lot faster, a lot quicker. And again, talking about progress, so I mean, the Paralympic Games have been around for quite a while, and it's a great way. It's a great representation. It's a great way to put the disability community on the spotlight, global spotlight, international spotlight. What better way to celebrate that than in the Paralympic Games? And of course, Tiffany, you are serving as a working group, as the co you were the co-chair of the World Economic Forum, but now you are on the working group of the Paralympic Games of LA 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games. I mean, I'm excited about that. We're still kind of on. I don't know about you or to our audience listeners. I'm still kind of on a Olympic high, but of course, knowing that Tiffany herself will be on that, will be involved in the LA 28. Tiffany, talk to us a bit about that and how does it feel like a culmination of your work and your advocacy throughout all these years?
Ooh, such a good question. So I have had my eye on getting involved in LA 28 in some capacity since 2019. So if
Wow.
you think about 2019 to 2028, that's 9 years foresight. Uh,
Wow.
at the same time, I think I also understood it's going to take time for me to build relationships, for me to find a way to get involved. But part of why I wanted to get involved, similar to you, what you said, the Paralympic movement has huge potential to change the way that the world views and perceives disability. At the same time, I had the honor of getting to attend the Paris Paralympics earlier this year in
Wow.
2024. But what was fascinating was as I got to meet different Paralympians, and disability employment was still top of mind. So the takeaway was the same way that we celebrate these Paralympic champions on the field in their sport is the same way we need to advocate and champion for them to find employment opportunities after they retire as an athlete, or even in between the games. And I actually don't think that's something we even think about, right?
Precisely.
And one of my friends who is a Paralympic champion that I interviewed in the lead up to my involvement on this working group, and it's a volunteer advisory council, but any way I can get involved, I'll get involved. And she said up until one of the jobs that she had most recently, even as a Paralympic champion in the US, she was still teetering close to the poverty line. And so that just goes to show that, you know, here, Team USA, we're so excited. We always have such a large team. Yet at the same time, outside of the games, how are we recognizing and valuing our Paralympic athletes, right? So let's not just make it an every 4 years thing. Let's make it so that if this is what they want to do, we make it sustainable so that they can do this and represent our country more sustainably. But like you said, I'm really excited for the Olympics and the Paralympics to return to the US. I think the last time they were here was Salt Lake City in 2002, I want to say. So it's been a long time. And this is actually the first time that LA will be hosting the Paralympics.
Yes.
So
yes.
this is history in the making. And if I look at, 2024 marks 15 years, so 2028 will mark almost 20 years. Exactly like you said, what a beautiful culmination. Maybe not culmination. We'll see where I am on my marathon.
There you go. There you go. Let's call it a milestone, like a major milestone into the advocacy and the fight that you have been fighting and the journey that you have had to overcome. Tiffany, it's a story. It's quite a story. I am very excited for you. I'm very, very happy for you. And to all our audience and listeners out there, of course, like the communication around the ableism, the disability community, want to get more. We want to get behind that. We want to get excited about it. More awareness, more inclusion, more opportunities. Sustainability is the word that you use. Like, hey, it's one thing to to help people, but like, how do you truly respect them and include them into society? How do we create jobs that that allows them to live, thrive? And I think that's the word right there, is thrive. And Tiffany, I'm glad that you are one of the leading voices in this fight, in this advocacy. And I can't wait for what the future look like for you and for the disability community and the DiverseAbility pride. Tiffany, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Of course, the website is tiffanyco.com, if I'm not mistaken. TiffanyU.com. There you go. TiffanyU.com. And Tiffany, where else can we connect with you? Where else can we learn more? And of course, where can we grab a copy of your book?
Yes. So TiffanyU.com will actually have a book page that you can search for your favorite retailer there, or if you already know what your favorite place to buy books is, you can search for the Anti-Ableist Manifesto. But while you're also on the website, you'll find all of my social links there as well. So if you decide you don't want to buy the Anti-Ableist Manifesto, I have a lot of social media content and many hours of podcasts that you can listen to as well. So no matter what way you decide to engage in this work, I hope you decide to find some small way to show up, even if it's by listening to this podcast episode.
Absolutely. And of course, by grabbing a copy of that book. Tiffany, if I'm not mistaken, it just came out. It's about to come out, like something within the day or two or something like that.
So as we are recording this, it is coming out tomorrow, October 8th.
Hey, all right. Congratulations. I'm very happy about that. Quite honored that we get to talk about that, of course. And again, very honored to have you on the show, Tiffany. Thank you for.
Thanks.
TiffanyU.com. Ladies and gentlemen, grab a copy of their book, The Anti-Ableist Manifesto. Connect with her, chat with her. And Tiffany, thank you again. To all our audience and listeners, thank you for watching the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next one. Bye-bye now.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.